Hello and welcome to another one of these episodes. Um, these are the tier list addendums. If you're here for the first time, we'll do a little bit of an introductory spiel. Since this is a channel dedicated to playing old school RPGs, but also breaking them down in terms of their design systems and so on, so that we can sort of reverse engineer them into better games in the future. I think it's important that you know where I stand on various RPGs, how I rank them and perceive them. I'm not expecting people to agree wholeheartedly with these, but I think it is useful when you're watching this to get an idea of who I am, in terms of what RPGs I think are prime examples of the genre and which ones a lot less so. We did a 3-part episode of this quite some time ago where we basically populated this list. It was a long talk. Oh, these episodes, by the way, we call them Let's Talk. It's a little bit like if you're ever on Twitch and you've seen someone just chatting. It's improvised discussions, maybe with some prior talking points in mind, maybe not, but yeah, it's not a scripted thing, and it's always quite long form, and yeah, freestyle, I guess. So yeah, we comprised this list in these 3 episodes some time ago, and then since we've had 2 addendums so far. This is the 3rd, where we cover games that we've played on the channel recently to review whether or not these standings are appropriate, because some of them I've not played in a long time, and occasionally we have games that either weren't on the initial tier list or new games, which is what brings us here today. In fact, we've got 2 games to cover since our last addendum. I normally like to do these in 2s. The first of which is Clair Obscur. Actually, this is pre-generated. I don't know who generated this. If you look at this and you say that's my list, then let me know in the comments, and obviously I'll get credit in. But yes, we've added in Expedition 33. We completed a Let's Play of it. In actual fact, it was summer 2025, although the playthrough itself comes out in December. And yeah, so we're going to talk about that, see where I stack it up against various other games, sort of the historical classics, and how it fares. I think with Clair Obscur particularly, I'm going to do one thing slightly different. Normally with these videos, when I'm talking about this, I try and make them kind of reviews with a certain amount of product, consumer advice, I guess you could put it in a really horrible way of describing it, but the point is that I'm going to talk about games without giving things away, so that you can be advised that these good games exist, or bad games, and then from there you can go and buy these games, play them, and get your money's worth. I don't generally want to spoil things about them. With Clair Obscur, I think we'll have a section of it where we discuss the story, and it's hard to discuss the story without spoiling things. So I'm going to try and divide the video up into sections, and I think what I plan to do is the first half will be on Clair Obscur. Well, I say half, roughly half, will be on Clair Obscur. The second half on Knights of the Old Republic. But there'll be a small section where I'll probably put like a I don't know, a coloured filter over the screen so you can see the difference, where I'm talking about the story details. So if you haven't played Clair Obscur, then just keep skipping past until there won't be any videos or anything like that, but keep skipping past until the filter changes again, and then you'll know that we're just talking mechanically. I think it's okay to, in my view, to spoil mechanical elements. I think that's sort of a little bit inevitable in a review, but to spoil story is feels a bit off. So yeah, so that's how we'll play that. The first caveat I want to put in, but yeah, I suppose. No, we'll stick to this. The first caveat I want to put in is, already on this tier list, there are two particularly odd games out. Maybe you might want to say maybe there's four of them, but most of these games are tactical or strategic on some level, in the sense that they're not skill-based games. They're not about dexterous inputs. I think that when you've got a game that is more about dexterous inputs than it is about your understanding of the mechanics and your, leveling up through it, for lack of a better term, literal or otherwise, I should say. I think then you're entering into other genres with RPG elements. I think you've left the core genre. And the two noticeable exceptions, I mean, you could argue New Vegas and Fallout 3, but Bloodlines, which is just so good that it's just utterly remiss not to mention Bloodlines. So I've fudged that in a bit. And similarly, I've fudged in Dirge of Cerberus, which is, it's mostly there just to dogpile on Square Enix, quite frankly. The question around Clair Obscur is whether or not, like, it spends loads and loads and loads and loads of time doing RPG things, doing really clear, random combat, like multiple leveling up systems that directly affect your stats in a very hard-coded way. It's doing loads and loads of RPG things, but it does have, and we'll come on to this a bit more later, quick time event the game. If you don't pay any attention to, if you play on normal difficulty, at least, the standard one, whatever it was that I played on, if you don't go in the menu, if you don't touch any of that, but you're able to get the timing right on every attack, every enemy attack and your own attacks, then I feel like you'll have an easier time with the game than somebody who goes in, min-maxes everything in the menu, but then can't make the timing on any of the things. So in that sense, it's kind of skill-based. But I'm going to include it here anyway. I think it's doing enough RPG things to be included, but be sort of judged on that as part of it. Its mechanics, because I think it raises some interesting questions, but we'll come to that. The other caveat before we even really begin in earnest is, I did a video relatively recently. It was last week as I record this, but would have released a few months ago now, where I was complaining about Clair Obscur, which is being nominated at the Game Awards in the Best Indie category, and it's like a 30 million euros of funding or whatever. It's just obviously not an indie game in any way, shape, sense, or form. That was a complaint about the Game Awards. Really, I would argue it was more raising awareness of the many complaints people should have about the Game Awards. It wasn't a complaint about Clair Obscur, and it doesn't factor into this. I want and actively encourage AAA games companies to be making RPGs. I think a lot of these games were made by big companies that are in well, you argue that's the Old Republic was, but there's nothing wrong with people at all, or teams at all grades of funding making RPGs. Go for it. I just think it's wrong that it was nominated, and I just think the Game Awards are ridiculous. But anyway, that's not the point. As I say, it will be judged on its own merits. I want to start with Clair Obscur with the prologue, rather than doing it things I necessarily liked, things I disliked, to do it in an almost chronological order. I really, really like Clair Obscur's prologue. I think it, one of the big challenges when you're doing an RPG or any story-based game is how do you get people on board? It's I suppose not even story-based. It's just what's your opening sequence like? How are you getting people invested? A lot of that will come down to your what if. But if you're doing a character-driven story, which is what Clair Obscur, I'm pretty sure, aspires to be, you need to establish character motivations. And I think I hope I'm not getting the name wrong. Lumiere, it was called, wasn't it? I think that place radiates personality. Firstly, it's got this the whole stylized period of France that it's using is a not particularly well trodden path. It feels like its own specific place in the gaming multiverse, or whatever you want to call it. It's got it gets a real sense of feel as to the people there, what they're experiencing and why, what the challenges are, what the oppression is that they have to get over, and we meet Gustav, and to a lesser extent Maël, and we immediately understand why he does what he does and what he's hoping to achieve, and it gives the player a really good sense of goal, as well as being just in its art design. I think it's just really good as well. So I think total props to that. It combines with the what if, which I will spoil the prologue. Should be a selling point to get you in, not something that you're going to discover over the course of a multi-hour playthrough. The idea that there is a monolith on which a giant naked woman is painting a number each year that decrements each year on a set day, and on that day anybody of the age listed on the monument dies. So you have this shrinking population, and each year they send out an expedition to try and stop this paintress from lowering the number on the monolith, to try and defeat her in their last year of life. And it's just, it's just such a strong concept. Like, if we're talking about the opening concept as it is in the tutorial, and probably like the first bit of Act 1 as well, is right up here. Like, it's probably an S. That I really do rate that. I think, without giving too much away at this stage, it has a bit of trouble living up to that. I think that's its strongest bit, by a way. I think that from a systems point of view, like, I played it shortly after Final Fantasy IX, and it honestly felt like the combat was answering a lot of my issues with Final Fantasy IX. With Final Fantasy IX, I got extremely frustrated about the slow, plodding combat where you spend, in a 10-minute fight, you're only making decisions for about like 15 seconds of that, and the rest of it you're just waiting for the enemy to act. The way that Clair Obscur does this with, they are quick time events, but nevertheless, like, the fact that you have to try and dodge or parry on your opponent's turn by getting a timing right in line with their attack is exactly the thing. It's not just a faster, more involving level of combat, but it actually it sums up, or it better places emphasis on the moments in combat when you should feel most alert. You should be more tense, worried, and reactive, and wanting to keep your eye on the screen on the enemy's turn than your own, if combat is to be truly intense like that. I think it works so well. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in the sort of preamble of this, there does come a point where you realise, like at first, I remember when I was playing, like, the first act, thinking to myself, God, it'd be so cool to watch somebody who was brilliant at the timings do this, because I bet they could just speed run this, or low level run it, like, easily. It's made to be low level run. But eventually it gets to the point where you sort of feel like, well, it's just about these quick time events. And I feel like they don't, like, I don't feel like there's a really good marriage. How I felt initially with that, as I say, I mean, it's another thing that's in these upper echelons, but like, as the game progressed, it kind of just, it eats in to the strategic and, to a lesser extent, tactical considerations of the game. Like, the leveling up systems has got, like, real problems. The leveling up in gear system, like, I didn't enjoy. I think that was really, I talked about it in one of the systems design talks. A lot of the rewards in there, in its skill tree, feel muted or poisoned. Like you go up a level, you get a new skill point, but like the skill that you can get now comes with such a trade-off that's just not really worth changing. Yeah, and then like the the mechanics of like linking, like the weapons. It didn't feel like you were getting a brand new exciting weapon. It was firstly not clear whether you're getting a new weapon or an upgrade to an old, and half of the weapons, well, more than half of the weapons you got weren't upgrades at all. And again, you ended up just, by the time you found one that sort of worked in the synergy with the other patterns, the play seemed to be to stick with that. So I just didn't feel like that was well balanced, or it just wasn't an enthusiastic system. Again, that's sort of down here. I'm not criticizing it. Firstly, like we talk about the graphics, and obviously Clair Obscur's graphics are way beyond anything on this list. Just way beyond it. Not just in terms of like sort of game, you know, directly against game, but even in terms of their performance in their relative years. I mean, like, what's the most, you know, even I suppose the original Final Fantasy VII, you know, which came out on the first, you know, 32-bit gen console, but it was by no means the best looking game on that console. You know, it's so. But then again, like, absolutely. Maybe you could argue Baldur's Gate is quite up there, but Baldur's Gate and Clair Obscur compared to pretty much anything else on this list, maybe possibly Fallout 3. They just had much more money to play with, so you kind of expect that. I guess, you know, I'm not really that into doing high renders of facial stuff. I think it's much better to do stylized versions than trying to ape real people. I think you run into the uncanny valley effect. Clair Obscur put masses and masses of effort into getting it right so that it doesn't feel uncanny valley, and it does it better than, well, most games, it must be said. But I still don't know that it was necessarily as expressive as Final Fantasy VII, which came out like 28 years before it. So, what are we? 29 years. So, yeah, I just. I feel like there's other ways that you could do that kind of thing that would have been a lot less effort and has got the same result. So I wasn't too impressed with the graphics. As I say, I really like the art design in the prologue. I was a lot less keen on it outside. It's one of those that starts very kind of imaginative, but I don't think it ever really branches out from what it is. They're going for like a very dreamlike world, where there's a lot of soft focus. But as my friend and fellow YouTuber, Substandard Michael, put it, frequently it just looks like somebody smeared a load of Vaseline across the screen. Like eventually it gets tiring just looking at that and just not really being able to make out what's there. Like that. I was watching a video on filmmaking and haptic filmmaking lately, and they were talking about how how soft focus is kind of ruining realism in cinema. And I know that Clair Obscur is deliberately going for this look as a stylistic thing for how weird the place that they're exploring is. But it's still it got frustrating. I also think there were like a few missed opportunities for things like the very fact that like the paintress and the monument are hanging over you at all times, but you visually can't see them, is weird. And then there's this, maybe it's just me, but it felt like a lot of the, like, I really disliked in it the traversal mechanics that were there. The fact that you can run, the fact that you can jump, the fact that you can hook shot, the fact that you can climb walls in a very fixed way. It makes you feel like you can move through the world, but in reality, like everything, like the amount of invisible walls in that game, and also like ambiguous surfaces that it's like, can I jump on that? Oh no, I can't jump on that. Like I think that's a really immersion breaking thing. If you're constantly finding the game's environment limits rather than the world's environment limits, it's not a like for like comparison by any stretch of the imagination. But like when I compare it to like for example in Breath of the Wild, I almost never tried to get somewhere for the game to go, oh no, that's not really it. There's an invisible wall there. Everything, the walls were cliff faces. The walls were, there not being a platform there. Everything was, and because that's a game that's kind of dedicated to traversal. I just think with Clair Obscur, maybe it would have been better if it just didn't have a jump function. And a lot of the dungeon design, while we're at it, because we're going to come on to this for another game, it's a bit bloody tedious, honestly. Just repetitive, predictable, and not really doing anything interesting. Talked about it for nearly 20 minutes now. Where am I putting it in here? Let's go get it. Oh no, sorry, I said I was going to talk about the story and the storytelling, didn't I? It's not going in G. Let me put it in the middle category for now, just so we'll decide where it goes later. Right, okay, so this is the bit where I want to talk about the story and the storytelling. So I'm going to put my filter on, spoiler tags, skip ahead, put it on mute and skip ahead until, if you want to play the game and not have this spoiled, wait until the filter changes and then we'll be out of the woods there. So we're going to talk about the plot and the storytelling in the prologue, in Act 1, Act 2, and to a lesser extent Act 3. I think, again, as I said at the start, the prologue gets off to a really good start because it gives you Gustav and it gives you his motivations, and you understand exactly what the boundaries of the world are, and what why, what you're trying to accomplish, and why your goals align with Gustav's. When at the end of Act 1, when Gustav, which also does a pretty good job on the narrative front of creating mysteries like the mansion and the curator, that's the relationship, these people who are sort of haunting Mael, although I'm not sure which one, whether that's in Act 1 or it's just Act 2. I think it's more Act 2, thinking about it. There's some interesting things going on there. While Gustav's death at the end of Act 1, like, it's not handled well for a couple of reasons. The first thing to say is that, like, when it's the game says Act 1 Gustav, I think there's, you look at that and there's a reasonable thing of like, okay, well, main character or no, he's probably going to die at the end of this. And I know, like, I just don't think that that's a good way to. I think it's not great foreshadowing, is it? Like, why would it be relevant? This part be specifically dedicated to him. But I think that, like, Gustav generally is a very good protagonist, and for Act 2, okay, fair enough. You choose to get rid of Gustav. Let's have Mael be the protagonist for the second act. Sorry, just very quickly deal with something on my phone. Yeah. Okay, so you set it up for Mael to be the protagonist and carry on the protagonist journey in Act 2. But then the game seems to make it. The game can't really decide who or if any protagonist is needed. It kind of turns into a weird, almost like soap opera style storytelling. Like Verso's just a terrible protagonist, because he knows the world, and he's got motivations that are unknown, potentially alien to the player. I'm not saying that he's a bad character per se, although I don't think he's a particularly great character. But I just think that if you're exploring this weird world and these weird things, like, you need to have some level of grounding within it and some level of understanding of the motivations of why you're doing it. And this is like one of the chief problems that Clair Obscur runs into for me, which is just this. The entire thing, like it's just one unclear motivation after the next. Like, why? Yeah, and then it gets even worse, at the end of Act 2 and into Act 3, where it's just like, sorry, who are we rooting for? Like, why are we doing any of this? And that's the third and really, like, for me, it was the hardest point with Clair Obscur to get over, is when it descends into what I regard as the lamest thing in storytelling, which is basically to say, even within the context of the world, none of this is really real or matters. It's basically, it's the and they woke up and it was all a dream type thing. I was trying to find a way of expressing this, and I'm gonna switch out to another tab. We'll stay in spoiler mode, so it'll still have some filters on, unfortunately. There's a Saturday morning breakfast cereal cartoon I want to show you, and the Saturday morning breakfast cereal. It's like a running web comic. They've got some brilliant stuff on there. Some things that are quite long. Take a look at this, because I think this really just sums it up. I'll give you a second to have a look at that. So that's how I feel about Clair Obscur. And that's how I feel about this postmodernist storytelling of like, well, it's really about us making art and creating pictures for you and what that means. And it's like it just seems weird. It feels like it's the culinary equivalent. If you go to a restaurant and like the chef comes and sits next to you and explains that you're eating a meal, and that he's used he's not telling you what ingredients he's used. He's just telling you that he used ingredients. He's sort of like, yeah, I kind of know that. Like, but the more you do that, the more you sort of, it becomes meaningless. Maybe that's not the best example, but it's like these characters, as it says in the comic, like, to me in Clair Obscur, like after a point, like, Gustav, Shiel, Lune, to say nothing of Minoko, and I can't remember. I feel like there's another one. I suppose, Verso as well. Like, they became less than dead. Like, within the context of what little immersion I had. So, I think that sucks. I think it's just really bad storytelling. And you might, some people, obviously, I didn't finish the game. And some people will say, well, when you get to the end of Act 3 and the conclusion, it's it's all explained and resolved. But the thing is, it lost me. And I absolutely don't buy into the idea that you should have to push through something bad when, like, so many of these games up here, not even like here, but like, here, are just like, well, no, you don't have to push. We'll be giving you enough good stuff that you don't have to worry. Sorry, it's Future Kajar just quickly interjecting here. Saying, like, just as I came to the end of the episode, I was like, oh no, I need to say at this point. One of my other problems with the story, with Expedition 33, with Clair Obscur, I call it that, is so many games on this list feel either cinematic in some way, or like a book that I'm reading in the storytelling aspects of it, and they let, obviously there's plenty of games that do things that books and film can't do, by the non-linear nature and like the your ability to take control that games offer. But generally speaking, I'd sort of compare them, relatively speaking, to films or books, But Clair Obscur feels like a TV show. What I mean by that, TV shows my least favourite media of these three forms. One of the things that puts me off television shows generally is that there seems to be a pattern of writing, particularly prone, I must admit, in American TV, but I think you find it all over the globe, where you go to the TV company and say, we've got a pilot, here's our pilot, we're going to draw you in with this interesting, excellent pilot. Oh yeah, that's good, yeah, okay, yeah, fine, we'll give you a season. And so they write out a season of 6 episodes, and then the TV company goes like, oh, actually, instead of doing 6, can you do 12? And so they're like, right, okay, we'll sort of switch some stuff around. We'll have this is a bit of a filler episode, but we'll put it, and then they're like, okay, did we get a second season? And or the TV company goes, right, we really liked that, we're going to commission a second season. And the original writers who wrote the first, the pilot and the 6 episodes were like, oh, we never really thought about that, so I guess we'll just, well, I tell you what, the characters can go to this place or whatever, and Clair Obscur feels like that. I never watched the TV show Lost. It's pretty old now, so. But Lost famously was a show that started with a good premise and then just, appropriately enough, lost its way because each new idea got further and further from the base point. And that is exactly what Expedition 33 feels like for me. I called it that awesome. It's exactly what Clair Obscur feels like for me. It's like the person, they did that prologue as a pilot, and there was like so much they could do with that. That was the pilot that wins you over. And then when it came to the end of Act 1, like in Act 1 they set up a load of things to later play with, but then the ideas went and got wacky and sort of I don't want to put too, no, do you know what, on this one, it's a TV show, I'll put, no, I'll avoid spoilers, let's be nice. Some of my favourite television ever were the first 3 episodes of Battlestar Galactica, the modern series, the Edward James Elm. Well, it's not modern anymore. It's a modern compared to the other one. Edward James Elmos. Like military drama in space. That show goes so off the rails. Like the ending is just a fucking that, and that's what Clair Obscur reminds me of. It feels like different writers came in with different, we knew, well, we could do something weird and wacky with that, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel coherent. It feels improvised. So yeah, just wanted to shoehorn that in because I think that is a major complaint I have. Anyway, I'll go back to Basque. Yeah, we'll end the spoilers there. Let's talk instead then, just very briefly about the final thing with Clair Obscur when it comes to placing it. I didn't finish it. There's 3 acts, as far as I'm aware. I got to the 3rd act, and I just got... the boredom had got on top of me. I didn't care what was going to happen. It felt sort of meaningless. That's not a good sign. So finally, after 39 minutes, or admittedly 9 minutes, that was preamble, what are we doing with it? Is it... Should we go down? Should we go up? Some people have described... I mean, firstly, it's getting a lot of nominations in various places for Game of the Year. Is Clair Obscur in the all-time S tier? No. Like, just no. It's just it's done very few things new, lots of things badly. It's fairly unremarkable in many of its sort of mechanics and stylistic things. I was bored of it. I don't know. It's not up there. Is it in A tier game? I don't think it's that. I don't think when you look at some of the royalty that's on this list, it's another appeal for sort of sense, and I guess one of the reasons why you want to look at like proper true indie in the current game development climate is that it's harder at the highest level, I think, to make ambitious games. I don't think the Clair Obscur to me is very ambitious mechanically. I think it's got some good ideas. I don't think it's bereft of that. I do like the idea of these player turn reactions, although I'm not saying for a moment that Clair Obscur is the first game to do that, but it's the game I've played that handles it the best. I like the pacing on the combat, but it's also like, in a lot of ways, it just does. I didn't even mention the bloody UI in Clair Obscur, which why would anybody, if you've not played it, and you're like, why would you care about the menu UI? Just wait until you get into the menu. Because I never thought I would ever complain about a menu UI, and yet Clair Obscur found a way. It's Pathfinder Kingmaker I really enjoyed. Arcanum I really enjoyed. Final Fantasy X I really enjoyed. Disco Elysium I really enjoyed. Persona 4 I really enjoyed. Baldur's Gate 3 I really enjoyed, although it is worth stating that I didn't complete it. So this is something that we're... same with Wasteland, actually. So we're now entering the realms of games that I didn't complete. So Clair Obscur could be here. If we were to take it down to the tier below, of games we've covered on the channel, Might and Magic 7, comparing those two, I mean, I really enjoy Might and Magic 7, but Jesus wept, it's coming in seriously low ball on trying hard, and you got to sort of love it for it. This is where the games start to get flawed, seriously flawed. Darkest Dungeon's got massive flaws, it's just the length, basically. Just a perfectly good 30-hour game stretched out to like 150 hours. I think the game that I most want to compare it to, partly because I've played it very recently, and partly because I think there's a lot of marriage between the two, in my mind is Final Fantasy IX. Like, these are both character-driven stories that have got obvious problems. Clair Obscur literally fixing some of Final Fantasy IX's combat problems. Both games occasionally made me feel things. I liked the gommage in the prologue to Expedition 33. I don't think it's particularly a spoiler to say that you eventually battle the Paintress. I quite liked that. I thought that was one of the better designed elements of it. I didn't think that I thought, by the way, that Expedition 33, the cinematography really dropped a ball. And the other thing as well, and I might get some flack for this one, because particularly from the viewer who donated it, because it was a gift from them. And again, thank you very much for that. They really liked the soundtrack. I'm not convinced. I'm not saying that the music's bad, but I'm saying as a game soundtrack, it seemed primarily to the point of excluding all other real possibilities, primarily concerned with creating the Belle Epoque France vibe, and much less concerned after the prologue with the emotions of the characters or the real feel of individual places within the world. I thought after a bit, like, I'm not saying that the music's bad if you want to sit there and be in that time period, but if you're trying to create a world within that time period, I think it falls short. I think Final Fantasy IX does a better job than that, and as I said, I don't think its music is the strongest of the series by a long shot. Looking at the tier below, Final Fantasy Tactics, Fell Seal, Fable, Fallout 3. I think it had more going on than a lot of those games. I don't think it mechanically even. I mean, I know I've complained about it, but I don't think it annoyed me as much as Dragon Age. I think that those games are in detail are cripplingly flawed. So, is Clair Obscur cripplingly flawed? No, I don't think so. I think it's a good, solid, decent RPG, and it can take its place in the C tier. So that brings us on, and we probably will spend a lot less time on this one because we really did get into a conversation there. Knights of the Old Republic. When I did the original tier listing, I said I'm really uncertain about Knights of the Old Republic because I'd played I loved Final Fantasy. I loved Knights of the Old Republic. I loved Final Fantasy X, and I loved Final Fantasy IX at the time. And then I played Final Fantasy X again over lockdown, and the opening bits of Final Fantasy IX with Substandard Michael. When we just did it like one Sunday after a session, we just played like the Alexandria section again, and it was a really sort of eye-opening experience, because if you'd have asked me just based on my experience in my youth, I'd have probably been putting these much higher up. But when I went back and played them, it's like they had not aged well. And I think it said more about where I was at the time, particularly 10, which is, as I've said before, it was like just quite a personal space I was in, which was weirdly coincidental. with the plot. So I was really worried about Knights of the Old Republic. And then when I tried over summer, shortly before the Final Fantasy IX playthrough, I think, I tried to do a recording of it. And that recording was plagued with problems. It's got a weird way of running Knights of the Old Republic. Like its cutscenes come in a completely different window. So if you're playing it, you probably wouldn't notice, but when you're recording it on OBS goes berserk playing Knights of the Old Republic. So I had to buy a different version of it. I had to do lots of tweaking and sort of weird ways of running it. Plus, at first, I tried to do it. Tried to get control support working, which was just a nightmare. Anyway, I got off to a bad start with it, and I also, like, when you're used to almost like the vast majority of games on this list, the control systems on them, Knights of the Old Republic is weirdly clunky. Like it. So when we were on the, I can't remember what the tutorial ship's called, but when we were on that ship and I was doing that, I was like, oh, this is not going to age well. And I was thoroughly expecting it to drop down and down and down, which may have influenced me. It's true that the combat in Knights of the Old Republic is pretty threadbare at best. I would say you could generously describe Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic's combat as strategic. I don't think you can go as far as to describe it as tactical, and I don't think it even like really has any aspiration to be. It's a very easy game. Although it must be said, for a very easy game, I did manage to die quite a few times. But the combat, you basically can just rock up, and most fights, I mean, we had a bit of a trickier time in Tatooine, but like most fights, you'll just be fine with. So, I think we used like 2 energy shields in the entire game. And like what, 2 of the adrenal combat stim things. And I said through the playthrough I didn't create an optimal character. There were a lot of problems with the character I created. And we still just got through it, and that goes like right the way through it. It's like the combat doesn't get more involving. If anything, it gets less involving as it goes on. The leveling up system, which is something else I like to focus on the channel, Knights of the Old Republic. It's on the surface it's D&D 3.5, but it's like when you compare it to like an Icewind Dale 2, which, or I suppose Pathfinder, which uses what is basically the same system. Knights of the Old Republic system is really quite watered down. Like it's a very narrow system. The character balance in terms of the classes doesn't. They don't have a great sense of differentiation, I think. So there's lots of things that make it. I'm trying to look down the tier list for an example of what I'd say. There's lots of things that make it akin really to a I'm not really sure there's anything really quite like it on here. Like it's bordering on an auto battle, really. So limited is. And then I could talk about like the emoting and of maybe not the emoting of the characters. Like the music is, it's okay. It's got Star Wars tracks. It's got a Star Wars feel. It's there. It fits in the world, but it's not blowing anything away. I just think that well, at the end of the day, I just really enjoyed it. And it's one of the games on here that I think it's really important to keep Knights of the Old Republic up here, even though it makes me, on some level, look like a bit of an idiot. Because it's a game that, firstly, to be fair, it wasn't so much of a thing in the era that Knights of the Old Republic was in. It's definitely, like, it's riding on the coattails of Star Wars. I know it's a stupid thing to say, it's a Star Wars game, but what I mean to say is that, A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back are two of the best pieces of cinema ever made. I think that's an uncontroversial view. They are absolutely excellent. After that, a lot of people will try and defend Jedi, but no. After Empire, there's a massive drop-off. I didn't follow anything after, but I'm not saying nothing after Revenge of the Sith. I think I saw 2 or 3 episodes of the Clone Wars, and that was whatever, an hour and a half that I'm not going to get back. The point is that there's such an inkling for Star Wars to work, and I think that Knights of the Old Republic, particularly, especially when you compare it to the 90s films, episodes, or I say 90s to early 2000s films, episodes 1, 2 and 3, Knights of the Old Republic get Star Wars much better than any of those. It understands the premise, and it does evoke that feeling. In many respects, it's, well, I think it's the best Star Wars game for feeling like you're in Star Wars. I think it covers the bases really well. And feel matters. And when we talk on this channel about game design, the principles of system design should be, in my view, it's not that system design trumps feel, it's that system design aids feel. But feel is king. And the feel of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is really, really good. I also really like the story. And I think that the exposition in it is broadly good. There are 1 or 2 occasions where, as I said on the last video of it, characters are using 4 lines of dialogue when they really need to summarise that into 3. Some of them go on a little longer than is necessary and repeat the point a bit. But generally speaking, it's really well told. Like straight from the off. I like the characters. The characters feel very Star Wars. Big characters. I don't necessarily know that there was room for 9 of them. I think that Knights of the Old Republic I've talked about it in the channel with lots of games that like you've got in the sort of Final Fantasy VI era, like in the 90s, your different characters meant different classes. So you needed to have 9 characters because you know you can have at least 9 classes. That's a good piece of variety. But as the class systems like softened, more and more frequently, like 9 characters, you know, as the characters got more three-dimensional in terms of their, well, not just graphically, but more importantly in terms of their personalities. They started to have backstories and desires, beliefs and hopes of their own. 9 is quite a large ensemble. You know, most games will have a tighter experience with slightly fewer. Maybe Knights of the Old Republic has one or two too many. But then again, it's got one foot in this sort of Fallout camp of like, how do you want to play it? You know, on our playthrough, we are a light-sided scout, or a light-sided scout. You know, who takes along some combination for most of it of always Mission Vow wherever possible, and then either Karth, Bastila or Jolie. You know, those are the people as we sort of progress through the game that we have on board. And it, you know, I suppose you want options for how the story could play. If you're playing a dark-sided character, you might not want to have anybody with you other than droids. Or maybe, you know, maybe you want to be a light-sided character with you know, dark-sided characters around you, or vice versa. Maybe you enjoy the reaction, like so. I suppose it offers a bit of a range of things to play with. But the overall arching thing with it, I mean, like the first time I played it, I just really enjoyed the story, and I really liked the level design on it. You know, this is something that Clair Obscur could learn like a hell of a lot from Knights of the Old Republic. Loads of games could, but Knights has got like, it's got worlds that are immersive by virtue of the fact that there's no nonsense traversal. As soon as or vassal in fog, when you walk into an area, you know exactly where the walls are. It's not trying to play tricks with you, and you don't. You know, I mean, sometimes I habitually run along the walls to explore the map, but like, I'm never taken out of the game state that my mind is in, because I don't have to question whether or not that's a sort of design error. Like, you know, is this real? Like, everything within the context of the world feels real, feels congruent, and it feels like my movement within it is rational. And it's interesting that, like, I feel very strongly that way, even though when you're in combat, it's hilariously bad. You know, like some of the things on the final episode, like we're in the Starforge, and like, you know, like we've got characters who are just running into each other rather than attacking the enemies because of the balked movement and combat AI, which is really sluggish on the inputs. But it doesn't matter, because like when you're moving through these worlds, like the populated areas like Taris particularly does it so well, of just like, it feels like a breathing world, because we're going back and forth between places like with meaning. Like we're going back to the shop right where we come out of the apartments at the start. We're going back to the apartments at the start because we've got a quest from somewhere else. But when we go to the shops, we go and get the quest from the cantina. We go back to the apartments to then search for these things, these people to hunt down that we know about from the cantina. But then we've got the money from that we found on that person, so that takes us to the shop where we discover something else that's and it's just it feels like you go between places in the sort of organic, lived-in way that you would in an urban population centre, while also having not in a tedious way, not in a Morrowind oh, I need to speak with Cassius, or oh no, he's gone to bed. Might and Magic 7, if you haven't seen that playthrough, oh, Jesus, you're in for a laugh. But some of that of right, I'll just go and sell this gear. Oh no, I can't sell the gear. It's 1 minute past 6 in the evening. They've gone to sleep. It keeps things punchy, not necessarily in the dialogue, although it's fairly punchy, but it keeps things moving, and the dungeon design as well. It has the least painful sewer level of anything on this list, and sewer levels are an RPG staple of how to create the most painful point in your game. I think even the sewer stuff from Fallout 1, which is relatively brief now, it's still just tedious, dull to look at. I think compared to Knights of the Old Republic, you're breezing through. And with that sort of level design, obviously it's aided in with the combat. The combat is, as I say, threadbare at best. But when you look at Clair Obscur, and sometimes some of those dungeons, just you're right, there's a hidden path here that goes round and loops around here and then comes back here, and you feel obliged to go and search for it in case you find the Pictos of 8 levels higher than you are, although you invariably don't. It's oh great, I got to fight a mime and got a cosmetic item that I'll never wear. Although that's something that Knights of the Old Republic and Clair Obscur do have in common is some pretty wild cosmetics. We're trying to tell a serious story, admittedly one of them pitching at a more adult tone than the other, but we're trying to tell a semi-serious story, and your characters are just dressed up like bloody clowns. Yeah. So that is a complaint. But I'm going to leave it in 80. I'm going to leave it where I found it, because I just really enjoy it. I think that the plot is good, and it was back in the day. It was the thing that got me kind of into / back into Star Wars. But even now, of the games I've played on the channel, it's right up there in terms of the ones I've enjoyed the most. And which I'm really happy with. But it's also, as I say, it's just something of a mystery to me, because many elements of it are quite poor. I guess maybe what you would say about it is it just plays, maybe there's an element of the Final Fantasy VII in this sense, although I do feel Fantasy VII has several it's quite a lot better than Knights of the Old Republic in many respects, but it just plays to its strengths really well. You know, it leans into that Star Wars storytelling. So yeah, I'm gonna leave those there. This one, they always go on longer than I anticipate. I'm incapable of doing these in short form because I just, yeah, just can't resist going on about it. What do you think? Particularly if you watched the Let's Plays, but even if you didn't, if you've got feelings on this for either or both of these games. I didn't even mention, like, talking about like simple, effective villains and antagonists. I really like Darth Malak and Darth Revan. I think they're two excellent, simple antagonists that work. That are not. I'm not necessarily dunking too much on Clair Obscur because it's not something I have too much of a problem with. The antagonism in that, it's the protagonism I have issues with. The antagonism, I'm well, again, to a point, but that's, yeah, I don't want to go into spoiling things, but like, yeah, but I really like that in Knights, that they're not like when you're writing a main villain, there's a school of thought that says if you want to do a good villain, you have to make them sympathetic in some way and have some depth to them, and that makes them relatable as a character, and that's how you have really good, strong, effective villains. And I think that's absolute cobblers. I think that you can write a villain with sympathies that give them depth and make them an interesting character. But particularly in a game, I think the first question is like, are they being an effective antagonist? Are they a motivating force for the player? And as I say, it's true to a lesser extent of films and books. Oh, I might have to cram in one more thing that I wanted to say about Clair Obscur, actually, like, back into the plot. Well, anyway, okay. Well, hopefully I did cram it in. Hopefully I shoehorned it at the end, and there was a seamless transition. It probably wasn't seamless. It was probably me doing my future thing, but yeah. Anyway, I really like what they do with Malak and Revan, and I really like how the characters feel. So yeah, it's staying in 80. But yeah, what did you think? Have you played Knights of the Old Republic? Have you played Expedition 33? Do you think you would have put them higher, lower? Things that you liked or disliked? Please do, if you're, for both games and all games on this list, if you're posting comments, be respectful to other folks. No matter how old these games are, there's a lot of people who will be discovering these old games for the first time. Don't go for spoilers beyond the I guess what you'd consider like the prologue / first bit of the first act, for lack of a better term. Like, just try and be respectful to other people. I know that's not necessarily a sort of backhanded bollocking at anyone. There's been no suggestion that anyone so far has done anything like that. Everybody who has responded on the comments has been great. Thanks a lot for all those. I really do appreciate the comments. But nevertheless, with the channel growing slightly in size, I think it's always good housekeeping to just make sure that we're doing this so that everyone gets maximum enjoyment. We'll call it there. 1 hour 14, pretty standard. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.